Bonjour à tous, soyez les bienvenus sur cette table ronde du LEC virtuel, une table ronde autour des thèmes de sécurité et de cloud. Avec les événements récents, je pense que beaucoup de personnes vont être très intéressées. I'm going to switch in English because this roundtable is going to be done in English, and I'm going to introduce you our three participants. First of all, Mr. Mauro Verderosa, who is president of the Swiss Cybersecurity. Hello, Mauro.
Hello.
I introduce also Mr. René Taboada, who is VP at Swiss Re. Bonjour. Hello.
Bonjour. Salut.
And Mr. Pierre, who is CISO at Université de Genève. Bonjour, Pierre. Hello, Pierre.
Hello, Yannick.
Okay, so now I'll leave you in very good hands of experts. Mauro, I give you the end, and I have a very, very nice roundtable. During this roundtable, you can ask for questions, write a question on the question slide of the chat, and everybody will answer the best question at the end of this roundtable. Have a nice roundtable. Goodbye.
Thank you, Yannick. So, can you confirm you can see my screen, first of all?
Yes.
Yes.
We do.
First of all, I'm speaking on behalf of Swiss Cybersecurity. I am the founder. This is one of the biggest community who is about cybersecurity that is in Switzerland. We have more than 3,000 participants so far. This is as a no lucrative goal. So we started to create events already almost since almost 10 years ago. And every time we are looking for people that would like to participate to our community, being our speaker, sharing an article, etc. You can also check our portal where we will find already some of the articles that have been written by our people. I would like just to invite you for some of the upcoming events. We regularly put monthly or every 2 months some events. The next one is going to be in July and in August. We will share a drink in the Bateau de Genève here in Geneva. And this is going to be a nice opportunity to get in touch with people, even if there are some COVID restrictions. To keep updated with our community, I suggest you to check our calendar or subscribe to our mailing list. You can find both information going through our website. So in the moment that we are speaking about this panel has been launched to manage, to understand which are the challenges that we should take into consideration in the moment that we like to move to the cloud. First of all, adopting the cloud means several things. Who decide to move to this strategy would like to move their on-prem service to something that is online, where we can have on-demand self-service, broad network access, resource pooling, rapid elasticity, and of course, major services, because doesn't mean that we just move to something free, but we have eventually face some costs, etc. In the moment that we decide to adopt this cloud strategy, there are some different ways how we can deploy our model. This could be something that is private. Private means that we still keep the ownership about our data. And for example, the tenant that we decide to deploy online, we have our totally control. So we know that even if it's something cloud, we still keep the ownership. On the other side, there is something that is public, where we could have the bigger example are AWS or Azure, where we know that we are sharing our infrastructure with other people. But of course, this is something that brings a better benefit in terms of cost. We have the community where we have several things that several deployment model, but are several tenants, but they are following the same structure. And we have a hybrid that is a mix of the two. In the moment that we move to the cloud, we know that from our on-prem, moving to IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, we keep delegating to the cloud provider part of our duties. So we know that we reduce some cost on one side, and we can more focus on the core business. So during this panel, I would like to interview two people, Pierre and René Taboada, that are two representatives in Switzerland, one for the private sector, the other for the public. And starting this panel, I would like to start to let the word to them to make an introduction. I would like to anticipate you that participating to this panel, following the QR code, you can gain 1 CP subscribing, following the scan. So if we can start with a quick introduction, Pierre, if we would like to start from you.
Yes, thank you, Mauro. And I will not be able to speak as quick as you. And sorry for my French English as well. So my name is Pierre, and I've been working for 8 years now as the Information Security Officer for the University of Geneva. I previously worked in equivalent functions at Orange in particular. So right now we have private cloud solutions especially for research. And we worked on, are still working on the integration of large cloud services such as Microsoft 365, Dynamics 365, SAP, Salesforce, but also more small confidential cloud solution for specific business needs. I also have strong interaction with my counterparts in other entities of the States of Geneva, or in the French-speaking cantons, hospital, airports, city, transport, and so on. So during our information sharing, one theme that comes very often is the cloud. So, and the challenges and difficulties that it represents for public sector entities such as ours.
Thank you, Pierre. And René?
Okay, so I'm René. I work at the Swiss Re, reinsurance company in Zurich. And I work for the Identity and Access Management division in the role of architect. And my job is practically all the engineering and solution design around access management concepts, which are cloud-born. We are cloud users already since several years, and we have several different flavors of cloud providers and services available for our community. And yes, I'm mostly focused on the identity and access management part of the cloud security aspect.
Mm-hmm. Thank you both. So if we can ask with some questions, let's say both your companies are quite consolidated since many years, both the university and Swiss Re. So as I said, a public in public sector and the private sector, which are normally the drivers that make you decide in both the two different cases to start to evaluate a cloud migration?
Do you want to get started, Pierre, or should I?
Well, I would say that the main driver is often the delivery of modern digital services, which meet business needs or users needs, and also the ability to deliver these services very quickly is also important. And limited costs as well. These aspects are also important because we don't have too many financial resources as well. So it's really interesting to see what the cloud can provide.
Mm-hmm. And René?
Yeah, it definitely comes, first instance, it's obvious it comes down to cost reduction and so on, but I will break it down to what happens or when teams decide to move on to cloud or not, because typically organizations will make available, okay, we want to reduce costs, then we go for a cloud solution, one or several cloud providers, and at the same time, teams will have available cloud services, on-prem services, and maybe a mixture of them, and also private cloud services. So I think for the teams, to be capable of deciding when do we go to cloud or not, then there are several criteria. For example, if your team is already working in an agile setup and you need to react fast, you don't need the flexibility, you need to fail fast, as the agile spirit says. You need to work with prototypes very fast without going too much yet into analysis and design. Then cloud offers you that flexibility for sure. Then if you or your application needs to that flexibility for handling workloads, depending on the scenarios, depending on the times of the year, on peaks, on closing frames, then cloud is also for sure something that you will really need to look into. If you want to focus, or your team want to focus more in the functionality of the application itself, and forget, well, not forget, but do not too much time taking care of infrastructure management, database management, and so on, then you go for cloud. And yeah, it's mostly the team criteria that I can think of.
Thank you. And imagine that now there are several people that are already in this transition from on-prem to cloud. What will you suggest how to select their deployment model between, for example, private and public? Which should be the main criteria that they should evaluate before making this transition? We can start with Pierre.
Yeah. I would say that in that case, you need maybe to reconsider your risk assessment, because a new risk analysis. Actually, what we do is that we redo a specific risk analysis because the risk parameter is different. We simply change, and the new compliance constraints also apply. So actually, the risk analysis can be very limited if risks are low. And if it's not the case, for example, for sensitive personal data such as health data, then we need to do a complete privacy impact assessment. So this can lead to a rather radical decision, because maybe we won't migrate to the cloud if it's too risky. It means if we don't have the minimum data protection requirements that should be met. So, and also the main new risks for us are legal non-compliance, leakage of information by or via the cloud provider, bad configurations of the tenant, lack of assurance on the availability of the solution or of the data in case of disaster, for example. So yes, you need to rethink about all that. And also you need to think that maybe each cloud service is an extension of the information system. And as such, you must respect the standard rules and security policies that applies also on-prem. And in this respect, the cloud provider, if the cloud provider has obtained certification, international certification such as ISO, on security, privacy, disaster recovery, and so on. Yes, it's important for us because we know that we can trust these providers.
Thank you. And René, normally it's when you are in the context of the corporate instead. Are there other considerations that are done when to select to use public or private cloud?
I think one very important consideration or driver for picking up public cloud is the scope of your end user populations. If you want to service customers, or do you want to expose applications to partners, other organizations, in the case of Pierre, for example, collaborate with other universities and so on, students which are not necessarily your employees, but you need to keep control of them. Public cloud, I think it's better suited for that, because it's much more, usually it's much more interoperable, and it's in the internet, so it's much easier for people to access it.
Actually, once again, I mean, it's based on sensitivity of the digital services under consideration, or the information, the data you handle. For example, there is no issue for cloud services such as Doodle, for example. But for some other ones, it's at very high stakes, and what the professional secret and sensitive personal data, as I said. So in that case, maybe you should consider private cloud if it's too sensitive. So that's what we do actually. And data classification in that matter is really important, because you need to rethink also about what is really sensitive for the institution and what is not. And I noticed that you need not every time to rethink about that.
Okay, so if I can recap, mainly it's before deciding, extracting, let's say, for what you shared, before taking a decision, the first step should be really understand which are the data that you are hosting in your company, and which are the services that you want to enable. So if there is something that it could be more or less critical in the company, so you may decide to go public or private, or eventually you could select an hybrid model where something remains, let's say, what is more confidential remain in a private cloud, while what can be easily exposed could stay in a public. So in the moment that in this case, I say that, like you said, that we speak about risk, also what it was also anticipated by Pierre. And we know that your company today are running, every time that you decide to enable a service, that could be an internal chat, could be customer service, could be anything. Normally, I am expecting that you are running through, before going to production, is executed a risk assessment. How much this risk assessment should be reevaluated in the moment that you take the same service, let's say the service X, and you decide to outsource into a cloud provider? Do we need to rerun actually again a risk assessment in this case?
I also kind of answer to that, so maybe I'll let René answer as well.
Yeah. Okay. So there are many things that are going to change in your applications when you move them to the cloud. First, if we speak, for example, around authentication, it's very likely that your application will need to start using a different method of authentication, maybe modern authentication methods. Maybe you will have to change and start using the identity provider, the security services of their cloud solution, instead of what you were using previously. For example, if you were using Windows before, now you have to start using Azure AD or Amazon identity services or whatever. It's the IDP of your cloud service provider is using, and you will need to reassess security for that. You will also need to reassess the access control models, because of course, since the IDP might very likely is going to be changing, and your authentication methods are going to be changing, your authorization methods and the objects that you use for authorization very likely will have to change with that. What else? If you are running, for example, if your application is a third-party application or an off-the-shelf application or a product, and you have to move it from on-prem to the cloud, then you will need to assess again if the infrastructure that you're using to run that will change or not, if it's going to be have to be deployed in virtual machines or in containers and so on. These are the changes that are completely different to what was happening maybe before in on-prem. You need to start thinking about risk assessment of containers, virtual machines, and so on.
Okay, and in this moment that you are making, you need to relaunch an assessment, and suppose that you are gonna, let's say, we said that you decided to move to the cloud. We already decided which is our deployment model, that could be a private or a public or eventually hybrid. We recognize that we need to relaunch a risk assessment, but we know that what is working on-prem we cannot always make a one-to-one with the cloud. Normally, in the moment that you are making this migration, should we also consider that some of the processes that we currently have inside our company could be modified, changed, etc.? How can we imagine that, for example, what people are doing today, they could do in a different way tomorrow? How this could impact the companies?
Well, I would say that what we see here, that it's all the company processes that are affected. Administrative processes with solutions such as SAP, for example, customer relationship, CRM, ERP, stuff like that, and also business processes as well, with specific applications or that specifically meet their requirements, their needs. And what we see is also development. You can do development now in the cloud, development as a service, and also security. My domain right now, we've got an antivirus, a new generation antivirus, and it's not possible not to have it on-prem. We need to move to the cloud. There is no on-prem option with this specific anti-malware. So everything is affected, I think. And in the end, it's no longer a question of internal or external perimeter, I think, but rather we need to think about the orchestration of all these services, whether they are in the cloud or not. And in this context, I think data management and security are really important, have a role to play, I say, in supporting this orchestration via tools like SOC, for example. We can extend the capabilities of the Center for Operational Security. We need to know what's going on these cloud services, X, Y, Z, and we need to get that centrally in the institution. So it's a paradigm. It's a new paradigm, I would say. Everything is affected.
I see one additional aspect to that, which is we come from the on-prem world where things are highly governed or tightly governed. Most organizations, I will say, where, for example, if you need to access to a database, or if you need to deploy a virtual machine, or maybe you request a new account and so on, you go through approvals and workflows and these kind of things, right? In the cloud, most of the things are thought to move fast. So for developers to move fast, and most of the things are self-service. So you go and create your own infrastructure. You even code it, infrastructure as a code, and developers have a lot of freedom. So the process or the way that we are governing things have to change or have to evolve. And it's a major challenge to cope with that, I will say.
And something, because you also mentioned, both of you mentioned something about data. So in this case, now that, let's say you are both two Swiss organizations, but let's say one, it's more oriented to the Switzerland and eventually something between cantons, while on the other side, there is a worldwide company, one of the, let's say, leader in the globe. So how do you manage, how should you consider also the data transfer when it's crossing jurisdiction? Or also it's, we could also consider inside the canton. Are there any consideration that you need to make before enabling a cloud service?
Well, if I can start.
Yeah, sure.
Well, for us, it's quite clear. I mean, for the administration of the administration entities of the Canton of Geneva, because we are subject to the cantonal law on the protection of personal data, which is called LIPAD, but it could be a different name in the other cantons. And we know from this law that we cannot transfer or have data processed in countries that are not considered as compliant regarding the data protection laws. So also in the United States, since the invalidation of the Privacy Shield, and it's invalidation by the European Court of Justice, but also by the Federal Commissioner. So I think unlike private sector companies, we can no longer invoke also specific contractual clauses. And that's really a problem for us because it's difficult to know under which legal conditions or law the relationship between Switzerland and United States will come up again. So, and also we know also that from the law that we've got specific regulations that we need to for outsourcing. So it's a specific article of the règlement d'application of the law. So in addition of the location of the processing of personal data, we must also consider the contractual commitments concerning the respect of the secret of function, the control of the whole chain of subcontracting, and stuff like that. So it's quite a constraint, but we try to cope with that. It's like a gray area right now. We need to, I think things will change in the months and year to come to be more stable and know what we can do.
Okay, and what about a worldwide company? In this case, René?
Well, yeah. It always depends on the type of data, correct? So I again appeal to the application teams to understand deeply what kind of data they have to handle, because at the end of the road, if organizations like mine, the bigger organizations, are usually offered by the cloud service provider, where do they want to deploy the resources? Where do they want to have a database? Do you want to have it in West Europe? Do you have to have it in East Europe? Do you want to have it only in Switzerland or in Singapore and so on? So it's up to the application owners that own those resources to decide where do they want to have that infrastructure. And they need to understand what kind of information they're handling. It has to be closely regulated by the company, and the risks must be accordingly assessed all the time.
Excellent. I would like to add something. Normally, it's in the moment that this is also including other regulation that could be the CCPA, the HIPAA, PIPED, etc. One of the way that we can use to put data in, let's say, outside our jurisdiction, we need to prove that there is a strong encryption during transmission and also when there is data storage. This involves, of course, some model for encryption, but also how to handle the keys. Could you give spend some words about this concept, like how we can keep also secure data in the moment that you are uploading to the cloud?
Well, I would say that yeah, it's a very important security measure, and data encryption is important because if we can encrypt the data under our control and guarantee that the data cannot be accessed by the cloud provider, then it's good because we can. The law on personal data does not apply anymore. So this model is easier to respect in the case of platform as a service or infrastructure as a service. You showed us at the beginning of the presentation, because the provider does not have access to the application or middleware or database part. So where the data encryption will be possible, and it will be under our exclusive control. So, but the problem now is much more complicated in the software as a service model, because it's the provider who has to be able to process and make the data available to the end user. So there are some alternative methods such as anonymization, tokenizations. It means that you can change the real data with fake data. And it means that then the provider won't be able to understand this data, and it's a way to secure as well, to secure the access to sensitive data in particular.
I would say,
yes.
Yeah, I would say that when we were speaking before about selecting a cloud service provider, a good cloud service provider will offer you by default data encryption at rest. And a good service provider will also offer you the opportunity to create and generate your own keys for that data encryption, and the possibility that it doesn't have to be necessarily stored in the cloud service provider at all. The good cloud service provider should also offer you the possibility to manage keys locally and natively. So key vault services, internal key vault services to the cloud, and good mechanisms to protect those. And a good service provider will also offer you a good way for applications to consume those keys. Speaking about workloads and automation and so on. So what's called machine identity usage.
Okay,
that's what comes to my mind.
Keeping in maybe you mentioned also about how to select a cloud provider. Are there any criteria that you would suggest to the audience? What could be some of the tips that some of the things that we should consider before selecting a cloud provider?
In terms of security?
Security in general, in terms of services.
Well, I can think of several. First of all, a good cloud service provider could offer you or should offer you a robust identity and access management system, or an identity provider, an identity service provider, and a clear differentiation between user identities, warm body identities, and machine identities, and when both should be used, in which different use cases both should be used, and a good access control for the access control model for that. Yeah, do you want to comment something, Pierre?
Well, as you said, I think it's all about data security. So data encryption is essential, but we need also some other security measures to get a good data security level. And key encryption is important, but direct access to the data themselves is also important. So it's important that the cloud provider give insurance about the fact that if a system administrator or a developer in their environment need to access to this data, then we will be able to know it either by logging or authorization or like that, or to have an authorization of the customer first of all. So it's important. So if data security cannot properly be ensured in this, especially in the public cloud, because we don't have all that, then you can reconsider that maybe coming back on-prem, or using a private cloud, or even abandoning the deployment because it's considered too dangerous.
But in this case, say based on everything we discussed so far, do you consider that if it is not today, tomorrow, may we arrive to have the same level of security that we could have on-prem also in the cloud? Based on your experience, of course.
René, if you want to.
Yeah, I think in many cases it could even be better, because if you, let's say, if you can focus on your application and you can focus on your code and stop thinking and worrying about database, infrastructure, application server, and so on, so the other tiers, and you can make your code decent, so to say, because you're saving the time for that, then you end up having a more secure application, I'll say.
Okay.
And that's the spirit of cloud. So that's the spirit of something as a service, database as a service, application as a service. You delegate in somebody else in a service. Trust they make a good work in their part in terms of security, and you can focus on your thing. And
Yes.
I think that works.
You put your services in the hands of experts in this case. And
Correct.
do you agree also, Pierre?
Well, I would say yes, and sometimes no, because yeah, most major cloud providers now have strong commitments regarding security and data protection. It's not because they're happy with that. It's because it's an important now business added value for customers. It makes the difference. But the counterpart is that these different services are prime targets, I think, for hackers now, and they are more likely to be attacked as well. And the internal risks should be not excluded either, because, for example, for Microsoft, we know that something like 1,200 customer accounts have been deleted by a Microsoft system administrator recently. So it's not a miracle. There will be still be a problem with security, but they do a great job, I think. And if we look at the security that we can deliver on-prem, sometimes it can be considered insufficient compared to what cloud services can provide, especially regarding data encryption and stuff like that, because we've got limited resources for that, and the big customer providers, they have hundreds of millions to do key management and stuff like that. So what we noticed is that on smaller, more specific cloud services, it's difficult to guarantee that security is sufficient due to the lack of resources as well allocated to the security of these services. And it also is difficult most of the time to audit. But then it's a question of risk. Okay, you go because you don't have such a service on-prem, and it's not a strategic, I would say, asset. So again, we need to rely on risk analysis and asset sensitivity, I would say, to adjust security requirements based on that. And also the counterpart as well is the more security and control you want, the more expensive will be the deployment. So all that is not for free.
Thanks. One last question before letting move to the Q&A. We also spoke, let's say, now it's between the audience. There are many people that are still evaluating the cloud, or probably many of them are also technical people that are also speaking to the management. But normally when you work in business, the business part, so management, serial management, etc., have to consider also the processes. So and the cultural part of the company. So how would you suggest to manage the cultural transition from an on-prem to our cloud services, considering that, for example, some of the people that are working currently in the company should be, in some cases, they should have their job spec be modified to do some other things, or somebody could not be eventually renewed or removed from their position.
Well, it's a major change that you focus on, because okay, systems that were previously managed on-prem will be outsourced, will be in the cloud. So it it means that IT jobs are going to change. It's obvious. And we need fewer system managers and more service managers, I think. People that will be able to interact and communicate with the businesses and users. Doesn't mean that you change the people, but you need to change the scope of the activities. And what we can notice is that it's not really easy to accept, especially when these changes are happening very fast, like now, and sometimes maybe too fast. You need time to rethink IT jobs, and it's not only for system administrators. It's the same for us. I mean, security professional, because now, for me, I think that we will have more a role of compliance controller, stuff, something like that. And less an actor of the deployment of the company's security solutions. So it's not always necessarily easy to accept as well, because it's not what it means that you need to maybe to read a lot of specifications from the cloud provider, their certifications and stuff like that, and it's a new way to see the size of job.
And René, something to add before closing?
Well, I think maybe just very quickly, what I observe is that most of the companies, what are doing is they are implementing centers of excellence whatsoever, centers of excellence for database, centers of excellence for encryption, for security, which are a group of people that go into the cloud, think how the cloud services have to be or should be used by all the teams within the company, so that they follow certain patterns and how they have to be used. So otherwise it tends to be a little bit chaotic, and yeah, that's what I observed.
Okay, so thank you both for this panel. So I will lend the word to Yannick, and we can move forward for the Q&A. Thanks.
Thanks, Mauro.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for this roundtable. Now we are going to move in live for the Q&A. Mauro is going to select 2 or 3 questions, and our panel will answer it in a few seconds. See you very, very soon.
Hello. So we're back live streaming. So I say already thank you for the interview that we started with René and Pierre. If there are meantime some questions from the audience, feel free to write. I start to pick up here something. So the first is for Pierre, if you can start in this way. So the public sector is normally more constrained compared to the private one. Are there any initiative from the state to?
We'll have to assume the rest of the question.
Initiatives maybe for keeping control over data, I assume, something like that. Strategy to keep safe on the safe side. Well, I would say there is a big debate about digital sovereignty. Can we keep control when all the institutions' data is given to what we call GAFAM companies? So also the open source and internal development culture can be very strong in our sector, academic institutions, and rightly so, I think. So we have to be careful about this, and sometimes we have to also to say no to the cloud when the offerings are not mature enough. And I know that there are a lot of projects right now to keep control of that, especially for Confederation, to set up some private cloud solutions. And I think there is a real need about a real cloud strategy in order to preserve this digital sovereignty and to keep control over sensitive data and business key processes, whether at the Swiss level or at the European level. I don't know if Mauro is back.
Doesn't look like. Mauro?
Hello, I'm back. I think there is a small bug with Mauro. He's coming back. He has just refreshed. I think he's going to come back in a few seconds with us. That's the live charm, let's say. Okay. And as I'm not expert, I'm not going to help you a lot in that roundtable Q&A parts. Well, let's wait 1 or 2 seconds that maybe Mauro came back with us.
As Mauro said, the audience can...
Yes, of course. If you have questions, use the question box and you will help us to finish that Q&A part. That's true with security specialists. There are so many blockers that finally you cannot do whatever you want on the web. That's a conclusion I have.
We are also here to protect and...
yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm going to call him. That's his phone number. This phone number. Yeah, I'm going to call him. Just waiting. Okay, well. And I think I'm going to ask you the question he's going to send me by phone. It's going to be funny. If it works. It rings.
Monsieur Mauro?
Mauro? Ah. Oui, justement, il est en conférence avec nous et ça marche pas. Vous arrivez à lui passer le téléphone. Ah. Ok. Dites-lui qu'il essaie de rappeler Yannick, l'organisateur du LEC. Il a mon numéro. On ne le voit plus à l'écran, mais on va y arriver. Merci à vous. Tenez. Well, it's the first big trouble on this conference in live. Just checking that he didn't send me an email. Well, we are going to wait a few seconds. If it doesn't work, I think that we will leave the conference. The principle is that you have done all the content with the first presentation. Okay. So Mauro told me that the same question for René asked to Pierre. That will be our first point.
We don't hear you, René, I think.
René, I think, yeah, we don't hear you.
I muted because of my dog.
Yeah, that's fine. So same question for you, René. Sorry.
Yeah, I can't comment more in detail as Pierre did. So I propose that maybe I make an open question to Pierre about the theme.
Yeah.
So to have his experience based on what we know, what we see, is how trustable do you see that are the social media logins to be accepted in a company cloud infrastructure? How do you see that?
Well, I've always the same mindset, is that what are the risks? So for us, for example, at the University of Geneva, social media is a part of our jobs. We need to be on the social media. We need to communicate, and it's part of our job. So I would say it must be part of the overall cloud services or cloud infrastructure we need to consider. And in that case, what we need to do is to secure this social media one by one. And one good thing about that is strong authentication, because then you can be you can be sure of who is going to interact on this social media. And yet on some other things you cannot accept, but for us it's quite open. I assume that for you maybe it's not as open as
yeah, it's not that open. Actually, in the rule, we prefer not to allow authentication coming from this kind of providers. And I think there is a big challenge with that, which is when we allow people, when we invite people to participate in our cloud services, usually in the rule of thumb is that we want that people to have a proper company relationship with us before we can actually onboard them, so that we know that it's a trusted partner or a member of a trusted partner, that there are all the legal arrangements with the participants of that partner to exchange information with us and access our information. And the major challenge comes when this kind of smaller partners with 2-3 persons company that actually maybe they don't necessarily have their own email domain and their own infrastructure. They use just Gmail and this kind of thing. So the more this smaller companies proliferate and they tend to use Facebook and Gmail and or Google as their infrastructure, then I think we will have to flexibilize things a little bit more. Yeah.
But I think there is a part you cannot manage, because now it's very easy for anybody in the company or in the institution to log in via 4G phones and to do whatever they want. So responsibility is very important as well. You need to say, okay, we've got a cloud services map or catalogs, and some rules about that. You can do this and not that. And for all the others things, then it's your responsibility. You know that you cannot do some stuff because it's too dangerous. So yeah, that's what we do. We focus on the responsibility of everybody in the institution about that.
Yeah.
Okay, just a question on my side, which is not very secure. In Switzerland, according to what you see on the market, what is the main, let's say, tendency in terms of cloud? We are running to private, hybrid, or public. What is the general feeling, maybe in your companies, or maybe if you have information on the market, where companies goes? Do they mix? Pierre, if you want to.
Well, I would say it's a mix. Yeah, for non-sensitive stuff, it's public, and when there is something you need to really protect and to share securely, then you go for hybrid or private. That's what we see. And you will take it takes a long time to set up a private infrastructure. So So you need to really think about what is important for you.
Okay.
And private is not necessarily cheap. So I think my observation is that, and given the fact that public cloud service providers are extremely aggressive with pricing and services and all-in-one solutions, the lift and shift approaches that take your everything on-prem and I will migrate that for you, it's becoming more and more attractive.
Of course, the COVID have accelerated things in some of clouds. I think the COVID crisis. Mauro is back with us. Do you hear us, Mauro?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I leave you.
Some technical problem. Yes.
I leave you the roundtable. We still have 5 minutes. Bye-bye,
Okay.
guys. I leave you.
Bye. If I don't know if my question was the first question I read for Pierre was listened or not.
Half of it.
Half of it. It was
We
just
managed.
about. Yes.
Yes.
Apologize. So just to be.
No.
Okay. And maybe we come to discussion between you and me, Pierre.
Yeah.
We have one major challenge, and I think most of the companies are going to have a similar challenge as we have. In the on-prem world, you used to have this clear division between dev, prod, pre-prod, prod, or maybe even more environments, testing, whatever. And when you go to the cloud, you still can have that segregation, but the question is how? Because of course, you're going to be paying licenses per seat of user, and you don't want to be paying 3 times licenses for every person that has to access different environments or different cloud tenants, one for dev, one for and so on. So how do you think that should be handled actually? What's your view on that?
It's a good question. Quite honestly, we didn't get too deep in this area, but what I saw for the moment is there is a tendency to do everything on the one platform, the production tenant. So it's not a good practice because it induces some problem of availability or integrity for users.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite complicated right now. We are not able to get back what we had on-prem, actually.
Yeah,
so
that's a very challenging question. We have exactly the same question, and the problem we see with that is that if you use production for development, then you have to cut the flexibility for developers very heavily, and the development process and the agility process it gets disrupted a lot. So what I foresee is that I will assume that the cloud service providers will have to come with some kind of idea in terms of licensing and usability and how these things are arranged so that companies can work more flexible.
More generally, I think the cloud market still needs to mature in order to offer both the expected services, but as well the necessary protection or what we are used to have on-prem. It will be different, but we still need to mature to be on the safe side.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I'm back.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's thanks a lot, guys. Muchas gracias, René. Merci, Pierre. We are trilingual here. Thanks, guys. Many thanks. Sorry for these small bugs, but I think it was cool finally. Funny and cool. That's what we provide at the REC. Thank you, and well, see you soon. And many thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a nice day.
Yeah, you too.